Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Kavan here from Public Lab. Super excited that we are having our first AMA session in our community. So Aprilynne is someone that I saw or found on Twitter about 2 months ago. And she was just starting out. I still remember when I looked at her profile, she was at like 600 followers. And then I just looked again, it's at 2,600. So that was crazy. And I think she's going to surpass my 3,400 very soon. So I set up this session so that I can learn from her so that I can keep up with the pace. Okay, joking aside, I think what I see in Aprilynne is that she's not someone who is just focused on hacking Twitter. When I read her tweets, she's someone who's super authentic, has her own personality, and has a lot of good content and is super engaged and helpful to people around her. So because building in public is all about authenticity. So I think Aprilynne is the best person to kick off this series for us. I had a chat with Aprilynne last week and I was just blown away how much I enjoyed the conversation. But I really want to get to know you a little bit more when people are thinking about their questions. Can you tell us a bit more about you as a person? Like not so much about Twitter yet, not so much about business, but you as a person. What do you value in life? Who are you?
Yeah, wow. Starting us off with a pretty deep question here on Wednesday morning for me. Uh, I would say that I'm a very creative person, and it's interesting because I've known that from a very small age. I think like around 11 years old, I wrote my first fantasy novel. It was like 300 pages long. It hasn't seen the light of day, but the goal is to come back and edit that. I was super into art. And I guess as I grew up and went through, high school and college, a lot of that kind of went away, right? And was surpassed by, okay, you should go into finance or banking or something that will make me money. And I feel like pretty recently I've come to the realization that, okay, screw all of that. I'm a maker, and building things and making things makes me happy. So that's been like a pretty freeing realization to come through. And I guess moving forward, I want to honor that part of myself in as many ways that I can.
We have our first question. So it's from Ayush.
So I just wanted to ask you, like, for somebody just starting out who's an indie hacker, they're just figuring out their first product maybe that they want to build, and how do they strike a balance between building product and building an audience? Because these days everyone is moving towards building an audience first and then building a product. But maybe an indie hacker doesn't know how to build an audience. They know how to build product well, they know the tech side of it, or maybe the then how can they strike a balance between the two?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm with you on that. I think when I was just starting, I had no idea how to build an audience, right? I don't I still don't really like social media. I thought that Twitter was, just another social media platform. Like I'm not really big into Instagram or Facebook. It took me a long time to get convinced to start a Twitter account. Um, and I guess my answer to that is start building, if you have something to build, start building that. And then think about what you've learned, or what other people might be asking you about your journey. And then just start tweeting about it. I know just start tweeting about it. It's like, yeah, it sounds so easy, but it's really not. I guess in that case, really, you can start off as, every single day, almost like a stand up, right, on Twitter, right? Like what did you do? What did you accomplish? And then as you start to get more familiar with that, kind of move into what you've learned, right? And kind of switch from what you've done to what you've learned, right? Because other people, they don't really care about you. They care about themselves. And they learn more about, it's more valuable to them if you share what you've learned, because then they can think, okay, I can learn that lesson too. Try to start off. I see some people recommending like tweet 10 times per day, tweet 100 times per day. I think that's kind of ridiculous, honestly. That's a lot of work, especially when you're an indie hacker and you're already doing so much. Try to shoot for once a day if you can. And if you keep that pace up for a while, you'll start to get more comfortable with it. And I don't think that it's too overwhelming when you're also building a product.
Hi, Aprilynne. Been following you for a long time, so love your content. This question is, I think, partially around audience building, but also more around how do you split your time between, I know you're doing a new podcast, and it seems like you take the diversification approach of like doing a lot of different types of projects and seeing like what you like, what you don't like. So how do you decide, do I put more time into my podcast versus my online course versus Tenderfoot? And I think you might have a full-time job.
Yes, yes, I do. Which I'd say I'm lucky in my full-time job in that it's remote and I'm new and my team doesn't really have it completely together, which is why I can take like hours here and there for fun things like this, and no one notices that I'm gone. As long as I get my work done. I wish I had a better answer for you. Yes, I'm trying out the small bet thing, inspired by Daniel Vassallo, who's amazing. And I guess when I first started out, it was just Tenderfoot, and I do work with a technical co-founder for that. He also has a full-time job, and it's tough because I guess my side of it, which is design, sales, marketing, everything else besides coding, it goes much quicker than he can code. And so what we find is like a pretty big lag in between, where I'm at versus what he can catch up with. And during that lag, I get antsy if I'm not doing something. I can't just wait. And so that's why I started building out other things. It's gotten to a point now where I think, okay, this is a solid amount. And my answer to your question is really whatever most excites me in the moment, I go for, which again, I wish I had a better answer to that. I do try to keep, progressing everything, like every single week. I want to be able to look back at the week and say, I've made progress in all of my projects. And if I haven't, then really focus the next week on kind of catching that one up to speed. I honestly don't know if that's the best way to do it, but that's what I've been doing so far.
That's awesome. It's totally working. So it's awesome.
Thanks.
I think I'm unmuted. Hey, I wanted to thank you for some help you've given me in the past. Obviously, I've followed you for a while, so grateful for the help you've given me so far. I'm going to actually just say this verbatim because I'm not sure of the best way to really ask the question. Basically, I want to build an audience, of course, we all do. I find it hard to share my very specific expertise based on the kind of product and service that I'm building. I do have expertise in other areas of kind of business and this journey, and I wondered if sharing that is going to enrich the value of building an audience, or whether it's going to kind of deviate from what I'm trying to do in the first place. Is there still value in basically me talking about things that aren't quite my product in general?
Absolutely. I think this is a great question. I guess some context about me. I started off my Twitter, I guess when I started getting more active, which was early March, thinking about, okay, thinking this is for Tenderfoot, right? Which is my startup that I'm building to connect students with internships at startups. How do I curate my content to focus on startups, students, internships? And I found that was pretty limiting because I do know a lot about that. However, there's just so much more to share. And what I actually found more traction on was when I was talking about how to Twitter, right? As I was learning, what should you do for your profile picture? What should you do for your banner? What should you do for your bio? Which is nothing related to my product, right? To Tenderfoot whatsoever. But people really loved that. And what you'll see is there is value in building an audience, even if your audience isn't directly related to your product. And really any way that you can provide value to them, if you do so, more people will come. And then they'll be much more receptive to the product once you do start marketing that and promoting that. So long answer that, short answer, absolutely. Share what you know.
Thanks very much. Really appreciate that.
Of course.
I want to jump in here to have an add-on little question. So a lot of people say, don't niche down when you're first building your audience. Like, don't just talk about one topic. How do you think about that, Aprilynne?
I haven't heard that advice before, but when I think about it, I guess it makes sense, right? Because when you're first starting out, you want to cast your net pretty wide. And just throw things at the wall, see what sticks, and what sticks, I guess, are the followers that are attracted to you. And then from there, narrow it down. The problem with starting out too niche is that you'll probably miss a lot of people who might actually be interested in your product, but who aren't interested in exactly what you're tweeting about, which is not great, right? Because you want to, when you're building an audience, you want to, really market that to anyone who's interested in your product. If you are building a product, if you aren't, that's something else that we can talk about. But yeah, I'd say cast your net pretty broad, but also something else that I've seen is that people are kind of afraid to tweet about certain things because they think, I don't know about this, right? I'm not an expert. And why would anyone listen to me if I tweet about X when I don't know anything about X? And the answer that I have to that is, if you aren't like building in public or sharing your knowledge that way, then learn in public. And people also love to follow along with that. Something equally as valuable. And through learning in public, you can help cast your net wide without being an expert in all of these different areas.
Aprilynne, like, how do you think about, so I think originally you got on Twitter as a marketing channel for Tenderfoot, and then you realized that by broadening it, it's actually helpful for your personal brand building, which obviously includes Tenderfoot. But how do you still use it as a marketing channel? And do you feel like enough people are coming through that channel, or have you built other ones to be specific for Tenderfoot?
Right, great question. Right now, I'll say this on the side and then I'll answer. Right now with Tenderfoot, I realized I don't want to market it right now because it's so far from being usable that I don't want to like aggressively market it, right? I want to start going to that stage once people can actually use it at its very base form. Right now, it's still not usable. And then I do have other marketing channels in mind for when I do start marketing that. And that's mostly like guerrilla tactics and reaching out to a bunch of college entrepreneurship programs, bombarding them with, hey, I have a super cool platform that can get your students internships at startups, bombarding accelerators around the world and saying, you have startups, you might need interns, let me help you out, and some other kind of guerrilla tactics there. It's interesting because you really want to balance, and I was talking to Kevon a little bit about this before the call, you want to balance in your feed how much asking with how much giving you're doing, right? Asking is the self-promotion, check out my blog, check out my products, subscribe to my newsletter, any of those, versus giving is just giving value, like in any way, right? And that includes building in public. So recently, because I have a lot of things going on, as you alluded to earlier, my feed has been a lot of asking, right? Like announcement, I have this podcast episode out, or announcement, I just launched my Gumroad page. And I feel like I'm a little bit weaker on the giving part this last week. And so I really do try to balance it out. So it's like 85 to 90% giving, 15 to 10% asking.
Hi, thank you, Aprilynne and Kevon. This has been great so far. My question is actually kind of related to this. I guess I'm a freelance brand designer. That's kind of my main thing. And then working on starting like a product around journaling, like how to keep a journal. Like, I'm not exactly sure how it's going to take shape, but very different things. And so I guess I'm sort of wondering how you balance like not confusing your audience when the things that you sort of want to talk about and like market about are very, very different. I mean, you've been touching on it, but I guess just, I don't know, like I wanted to ask it kind of that explicitly.
Of course. Yeah. So 2 words, personal brand. Because if you think about these 2 things that are very separate, what's the one thing that's tying them together? It's you, right? Yeah. And so if you try to go after people interested in brand design and then interested in journaling, you'll probably get kind of 2 separate people, and the brand design people might think, she's tweeting a lot about this journaling thing. I don't really care about that. Maybe I'll leave, right? And vice versa. But if you get people on board who care about you, they're sticky, and they'll stick around no matter what you say, and they're actually more likely to share your products with other people that they know who might be interested in either category. And so, right, for me, I started out with Tenderfoot, right, students and startups. I guess I'm lucky in that a lot of my followers are students or indie hackers, and so they're kind of in the startup realm. But when I've reached into like podcasting, right, I know a lot of people might not listen to podcasts or they might not care, which is fine because I also did not care about podcasts at all before like a couple months ago. Or banner design, because some people's like, I don't care about that, right? But if they care about you, then they'll stick around. And it's harder. It takes more time to build up personal brand, but you know, that's kind of the answer to that.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks.
Of course.
So I'm really curious about what that tipping point was for you in March, because I saw I saw you doing a lot, like you leveraged community and you sort of did a few separate things to kickstart yourself. It was very cool to watch.
I guess I joined Twitter in December, and I was actually doing a very different startup at that point, which was in senior care. It was actually how I met Sam. And at that point, I didn't know how to use Twitter. I was trying to tweet about senior care things. I was not an expert in senior care. I followed a lot of geriatricians and gerontologists, of people who, you know, care for and study aging seniors. And it was not working, right? No one cared about what I had to say because, you know, if they wanted to learn about what's new in geriatrics, they'd follow a well-renowned geriatrician, right? And not me. And in March, that's kind of, I guess, two things happened. I abandoned that previous startup, started Tenderfoot, and then started following like a whole bunch of entrepreneurship / startup recommended in Twitter. And someone who came up pretty early on was Paul Jacobine, who was founder of Copy.ai. And he really introduced me to the whole concept of building in public. And I thought, hey, that's cool, right? I can do that. And it sounds much more fun than pretending that I'm an expert in things that I'm not. So once I started that, I guess the hashtag itself did bring some volume, some traffic, but I guess the biggest, like a couple of things took off. Actually, when I first started, it was all about threads. So threads are really, really important when you are trying to build your audience, because they're much more retweetable if people find value in them, because they want their followers to get the same value from that thread. And so the first thread that really took off was a thread about profile and banner kind of do's and don'ts. And a couple of reasons why this took off. One is that I tagged Barricade, who is this amazing 12-year-old developer Twitter icon. If none of you follow them, it's Hey, Bereket. So I tagged him because I did learn a lot from what he was doing. And then kind of went through do's and don'ts. That kind of format of do's and don'ts people also like, because it's very easily digestible. They don't have to think too hard because you already tell them yes and no. And because it was about Twitter, it's applicable to everyone because everyone has a Twitter profile, right? And so that was very easily shareable. He also retweeted that because I tagged him. I'll say be careful. So two things. One, tagging or praising larger accounts can help you a lot if they retweet. However, if you do it too much, they will find you annoying and they will mute or block you. So if you do so, do it when it's very relevant or directly applicable to them. Don't overdo it. Don't tag them when it has like nothing to do with them. And then I guess second thing is I started doing some, like, again, it was all threads, which people loved. And then it was all giving, nothing about Tenderfoot for like the first 2 weeks, which in retrospect, that's not that long, but to me, it felt like a long time. And something else that I did was like freebies. So I'd say, you know, send me your profile picture and I'll replace the background with any color that you like, right? And that kind of started getting some engagement. People like, oh, you know, I want one of these too. And starting to build that out and kind of building a reputation of good threads really helped me grow. The caveat is that shortly afterwards, I thought, do I have to write threads every day for the rest of my life for people to keep following me? Will they stop following once I write a single tweet? But that, that's something else.
And I also know that you have a lot on your plate. And so the second part of that question is, what are the project management sort of tools that you're using to manage all of the things that you're experimenting with?
I don't really use any project management. I maybe should. I do use Notion. I just started using Notion for my online course development because there are just a lot of moving parts in there. And I think having like a full master task of everything that needed to be done for that specific project is really helping me not get too overwhelmed by it and keep chipping away at it. But everything else is just kind of freeform.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, it's a little bit similar, but maybe I will follow up that. Like, I mean, how do you define, like, in a more detailed way, this growth phase? Like, or do you mean that I regularly like text some people, I regularly create some tweets, or can you define some phases? You know what I mean, like about this growth process?
In terms of growth phases, so I guess when you're just starting out, is probably okay. Also, I'll say I'm completely making this up right now. So to your first part, I don't have like set growth phases, but when I think about what I've done, in the first part, when you're just starting out, it's all about like provide value and reach out to people. Something that Kavan actually had in his building in public newsletter, which I actually knew about. I did, subconsciously beforehand, is don't try to, I guess, before we all know that Twitter is about building relationships, and large part of that is through DMs. And a process that works when you're kind of like 0 to 600, 750 I guess let's say 600 followers is look at, don't go after the accounts with like thousands and thousands of followers because they're likely really busy and they might miss you. They also might already, things are already working for them, so they might not be looking for a lot of other new relationships to be built. Instead, look in the reply section of the people with thousands of followers, and what you'll see, and look especially for people with less than 750 followers there. And what you'll find is people who reply to those larger accounts, they're usually already pretty engaged on Twitter. And since they're engaging, they're probably looking for their network to build or other relationships. And so engage with their tweets. If go to their profile. If you like them, follow them and engage with their tweets on their own platform. If they engage back, take it to the DMs, and then if that relationship forms, that's great. Repeat and do that as many times as you need to start building out a solid community that you feel like I have people here who actually care about me, not maybe what I'm building, but me, because you've formed those authentic relationships with people around you. And so do that up until you have like around 600 followers. And then after that, start, I guess, this entire time you've been providing value, but keep really dialing down on providing value that's shareable, because then that community that you've already built in the first phase can start retweeting your tweets, sharing that out, and then you'll keep growing from there. That's kind of where I'm at so far. I can't tell you what comes after this phase.
And the second question is, what kind of language do you use that people love? So I mean, like a friendly language, or what kind of words do you prefer? Yeah, that's my question. Thanks.
Kavan's going to love this because one word, authenticity. It's true. People love authenticity right now. Realness is very in, it's a trend throughout like all of social media, right? People love seeing like Photoshop versus reality. As much as people, I guess, idolize the superstars, and I guess that's one of the reasons why TikTok is so huge right now, is because it's a lot more real, right, than like very curated, polished Instagram posts. And so I guess being authentic, I know that authenticity means something different to everybody else, but something that people really love is friendliness and I guess approachability, right? They don't really want to see you as, an icon up here that they can never get in contact with, right? But if you, reply to everything in a really friendly way, try to reply to DMs. I've stopped replying to a certain type of DM recently, but that's kind of beside the point. And really just do what you can. Speak for me. It's kind of like I've intentionally toned down my writing a little bit. I love writing and I read a lot, and so I'd say my vocabulary when I'm trying can be at a pretty high reading comprehension level, but that's not what works on Twitter. What works on Twitter is literally like 6th grade comprehension. And so when writing my tweets, I've like in editing, I've literally like taken out some of the bigger words and replaced them with easier synonyms in order to bring that down. And also keep in mind that, not everyone might be fluent in the language that you're using. And so bringing, that kind of reading comprehension down a bit can also help a larger variety of people engage and interact with your tweet.
So we have Dennis here who just got his Twitter account blocked. So he has a question related to that.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm currently in Twitter probation or Twitter jail, however you want to call it. For I don't know why, but that led me to have a question about kind of like platform risk. And how do you see that / how are you like de-risking, if at all? Like how do you approach this issue? Just because it seems like it can come kind of out of the blue.
Yeah, I'll say it didn't even occur to me until I saw that you were blocked. And I thought, oh no, if Dennis is out, what's going to happen to the rest of us? And so because I haven't really been thinking about it, I'd say I don't really have a good answer for you. It's interesting because what a lot of people do is build up a newsletter, right? And send that out, and people who are engaged keep along with your newsletter. So even if you get blocked from a certain platform, you still have your newsletter. I haven't done that because, and this is probably something that I'm doing wrong, but personally, I don't really like reading newsletters. And so it's really hard for me to build a newsletter because it's not something that I personally relate with very well, right? I subscribe to them and then they just kind of sit in my inbox unopened forever. But that's something that I've seen a lot of people do, is that for me, I guess just because I built up so many like authentic relationships on Twitter, if I did get blocked, I'd probably be able to start fresh with enough traction to keep going, because so many of my followers are not people who like don't know me and just following along for kicks and grins or because of some of the content that I bring out. It's people who actually care. But I wish I had a better answer to your question. It's a very real risk, and I haven't thought about it enough so far.
Hey, Aprilynne. You might hear some fireworks in the background because tomorrow is a really big celebration. So just don't mind that. Yeah, my question is, I'm just curious about your journey. So how did you arrive to Twitter and decide to focus on audience building and indie hacking instead of, because you mentioned about you're a really creative person, you wrote a novel and all. So I'm just wondering, like, how did you decide to do indie hacking instead of, for example, writing more novels instead?
Right. Yeah, I'd say I was most creative when I was pretty young. Again, I was like 11 or 12 at that time. And then as I grew older, a lot of that went away and was replaced with, I got to do things that will make me money, even if there's nothing creative about that. And so that kind of disappeared. When I first came onto Twitter, all of that was like far in the past. I never thought I would be tapping into, I guess, that side of myself for a very long time. Like my day job is in like corporate finance. So it's like the least creative thing you can possibly imagine. And to answer like why I got into Twitter, I had been urged by some friends, you should make a Twitter, you should make a Twitter for like a pretty long time, like maybe 2 years at that point before actually making a Twitter. Because again, I thought of it just as social media. And then when I started Twitter, it was like for the wrong reasons, right? It was mostly about like, I want to connect with people, but I don't really have any connections to those people, right? Back in like the aging realm, and very like focused niche on that. So which I guess goes back to Kavan's question, is that it wasn't really broad enough. And when I joined, I guess the second time, which was in March, I really was focused on Tenderfoot, right? And myself. And I thought, okay, the two audiences that are applicable to Tenderfoot are students who are interested in startups and founders who are interested in interns. And so from there, the type of content that I produce, I'd say, is much more creative now. And that's just because it's a personal strength of mine that I've been able to leverage into it. But it's not like I'm talking about creativity. And the reason why is because it's not aligned, I guess, enough with my audience when I was beginning. Maybe later on, after I grow some more, I might be able to talk more about creativity. I mean, I released a tweet thread about idea generation, which is kind of related, but more of like a process, and really anything that I think is helpful to my followers. But I'll say that's a difference, is that I don't tweet for myself and my own interests. I tweet for my audience and what might be helpful to them. I don't know if that answers your question very much. Let me know if you have follow-ups.
No, I think I got it. Do you think you would, I don't know, in future, do more tweets about writing? Because writing Twitter is a really big community as well.
Yeah, I'd say it's interesting because I don't think I've fully embraced that part of my identity yet. I think, oh, I like writing as something that I did in the past, but there's probably some insecurity there as to, can I really call myself a writer? Can I really be embraced into writing Twitter if I haven't, written anything besides Twitter posts for a long time? It might change. Maybe I'll start a blog one day and start tweeting about like writing that journey. But so I can definitely see it in the future. I guess it's tough when you're being pulled in lots of different directions. I guess for me, it's been important to make a foundation first of what's good for you, and slowly add on new things as you can handle them, and kind of build it out that way.
Yeah, hi. So before I ask my question, I just say that Sam just said in the comments, you are a writer already. Okay, so you never have to wonder whether you're a writer or not. You write awesome threads and tweets, and you write anything, you're a writer. Coming back to my question, so it's a tactical question. Do you use any tools around Twitter? So we see a lot of people scheduling tweets in advance. So there are tools around scheduling. There are tools around analytics. So people do a lot of analytics around their followers and their engagement numbers.
Interesting. Okay, I'll start with what I use. The most valuable tool that I use is chime.so, built by Spencer Jones. It's a tweet scheduler, but it also tells you when your audience is most active. And so that's really helped, because then I can not only schedule my tweets, but I can schedule them at a time when is best for engagement for my own personal audience. So I've loved that. If anyone wants a discount, DM me and I can give you a code for that. But I'm not promoting it to promote it. I use it all the time. It's been the best. I will DM you. What?
I will DM you for this.
Yes,
for the discount.
Great, perfect. The other tool that I use, which to me hasn't been that helpful, I have 6 months free for ilo.so, because I guess I did write a blog post. I wrote a blog post for Dan, the founder's his ILO blog, and I guess in return he gave me 6 months free. that is a Twitter analytics tool. So, it tells you about your followers, not anything specific about your followers, more just like trends over time with how many you've been getting, the engagement, your impressions, because all of the fun stuff that Twitter tracks itself, but in a little bit more detail, and some other things that Twitter doesn't exactly track. I honestly don't find it that helpful because I found that I don't really care about like trends over time. I feel like I can look at my tweets and see, okay, these are doing well, or these are doing not so well, or I've been growing a lot, I haven't been growing very much. And you can see that pretty easily just looking at your own account. And then I make adjustments from there. So yeah, I mean, you can still try it out if you super into analytics. I would recommend ilo.so, but it hasn't really helped me in an observable way with my own Twitter journey.
Okay, I can see that our questions are going down the more technical direction, which is great. I think last 15 minutes, let's talk about tactics.
Fantastic. So I'm a bit like confused in terms of like Twitter versus other social media platforms. I've been following, like in my case, Twitch streamers, right? They're starting to become influencers on Twitter, Instagram, and have a big following, but their appearance can be very confusing. So on Instagram, they have a complete different personality versus on Twitter. And then I decided to actually unfollow them on both platforms. Where do you think it should be consistent, or do you think it should be a clean cut between Instagram and other platforms like Twitter? Where do you make a cut? Or do you think consistency is the way to do it?
So I guess I'll preface this by, I don't know a whole lot about other social media platforms besides Twitter for me personally. What I've seen is that your specific tactics and content should be a little bit different. And because different platforms are made for different things, they have different audience, builds on different platforms. However, your personal brand should be consistent. If you're a completely different person in two different social media platforms, that's kind of a red flag, right? Because then, your audience wants to know who you are. They're following you for a reason. And if that changes, they think, who is this person? Has everything been a lie? I mean, not that dramatic, but you get the point. But tactics itself should be a little bit different. Don't just like copy and paste tweets from Twitter and then make it pretty and post it on Instagram, or put it to music and put it on TikTok, right? There are different content channels and specific forms of content that should be different in different social media platforms.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, how do you decide what you're going to, what are the topics you're going to talk about in your threads?
For tweet ideas, I actually just released a thread about this. There are two tactics that I use a lot. Actually, no, one of them I don't use at all. There's one tactic that I use a lot called the birdsong technique. I think it was created by Ali Abdal.
Okay.
And basically, as you scroll through your Twitter, be conscious of what other people are tweeting about, and then think about, okay, what are some spin-offs of this? I'll bring up an example, which is something that Kavan tweeted, actually. One second, I'm gonna bring this up. Okay, so he said, when you hack too much to grow your follower count, you start losing your authenticity. If you want to be relevant for a long time, start sharing your true thoughts. And I see that, and obviously it's like, hey, this is a nice tweet, but if you kind of take off your consumer hat and put on your creator hat and start thinking, what does this inspire? I was inspired to write threads about, how to be authentic, what authenticity means, the benefits of being authentic, what Twitter hacks to avoid. So that's like 4 ideas. Obviously there's some overlap there, but 4 ideas that come from Kavan's one tweet. And if you keep doing this, just scrolling through your Twitter feed, if you follow the right people who are providing value, and practice enough, you'll be able to come up with other ideas. And the reason why it's called the birdsong technique is because if you're outside right now in the spring, you'll hear lots of birds and you'll think, hey, this is so pretty, right? But if you know about birds, you'll be able to identify, oh, that's the song of a robin, that's the song of a finch, that's the song of a sparrow. So it's all about being able to go from consuming everything blankly to being able to identify this is content that I can be inspired by / copy. So that's one technique. The other technique that I haven't used, but people seem to really like, is called coal mining. And so basically you go to a hotspot on the internet. Like for me, I can go to like Indie Hackers, that blog, and just scroll through the headings, but not actually look at the post itself, and then see what you're inspired to write from that. It can literally be the exact same topic as someone had in their header, but because you don't read it and you think about, spin it off in your own personal way, that's really where you can provide value. And keep in mind that everyone copies, nothing is really original. If you think something's original, it's probably because you don't actually know the true source of where it came from in the first place. But there are unique messengers. And so if you just take the same concept, put your own flair onto it, the possibilities are really endless in what you can tweet about.
The other question here was like how much time do you would you book for writing threads in a week? Let's say, do you schedule some hours per week, or would you just, when you have the inspiration, okay, you go and then you write it and then you share?
Usually when I have an idea for a tweet or a thread, I write down kind of my idea. It can be an outline for a thread or just topic, and I'll put it in my bank of ideas. And then when it comes time for me to, I'll also kind of plan out my week in terms of sometimes what kind of content I want to do each day of the week, just to make sure that it's balanced out enough. I don't self-promote too much. I have a nice mixture of threads and tweets. And when it comes time, like the night before I want to release a thread, I'll start writing it. And then I'll look at it again the next morning to make sure this still looks great, or this is trash, never mind, I'll write something else for today and work on this the next day. So yeah, and it'll take me, if it's a good thread, it will take you some time to write it out, right? It's not like I can get this out in 10 minutes, right? It'll take some time. But I usually do that for I don't know, as long as it needs to, the night before.
Awesome. Aprilynne, I'm curious if you differentiate between audience building versus community building. I think in how I would think about it, you're doing a lot of audience building, and I'm curious if you do community building today, or you think about it, and what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about community building, honestly. I mean, obviously, Kavan's been doing a great job with this, which is why we're here today. Right now, I've been doing a lot of audience building. When I think about community, it's a lot about personal community and whether or not I feel supported enough to stick it on Twitter, even when things are getting rough. I feel supported enough to stay. One day, I'll probably build out a community, especially with Tenderfoot. I feel like there are a lot of community possibilities related to that, but I haven't fleshed it out very much yet. However, they do go hand in hand, and if you are building an audience, it'll be a lot easier for you to build a community.
Just really quickly on that, I dropped a link in the chat about building brand communities. There's this woman, Carrie Melissa Jones, who is sort of the expert in this. Her whole thesis is around building audiences for yourself, exactly what Aprilynne is doing. So I think there's a lot of synergy there. My question, what was my question? Oh gosh, tactics, right. So one of the things that I've noticed that you are incredibly good at, and you are doing differently, you are not posting 4 or 5 threads a day. Your actual posts tend to be limited, but you do a heck of a lot of conversation and replying, engaging, looping people into conversations. And I'm wondering sort of, I have to look at my question again. I don't remember what I asked. Oh yeah, so I know you had mentioned at some point in one of your threads how you had turned on notifications for a set of people to reply to. How were you finding your first sort of cohort of influencers that you knew you wanted to be having conversations with, and how are you growing that or changing that up over time?
Yeah, I guess this is probably something that I should have mentioned in the question about stages. But one tactic is, as Sam was alluding to, is find a pretty large influential account in your space. So for me, an instance could be like Daniel Vassallo. He tweets a lot about audience building and small bets and other things that I think is really interesting, and some of his followers might be able to be interested in me. Turn on their tweet notifications and then comment. Be first. It's really important to be first and to provide value, because then people see you first. And if you know that a tweet's going to blow up, but you're there first and you've had some initial engagement, then it will give you a lot of impressions, which will mean people will click on your profile, which means if your profile is good enough, you'll get more followers. How I first started to look at that was I have no real methodology to this in terms of finding these people. This was a lot of seeing what Twitter was suggesting and clicking on them and seeing, oh, this is someone that I think I can resonate with, or no, I don't think this is the right person. And then kind of go from there. I did stop doing that for a long time. I actually turned all of my tweet notifications on my phone off because it was just too much. So for like, I don't know, a month and a half, I stopped. I turned them back on just for DMs now, which means I'm starting to get those notifications more. But I tend to do that a lot less now because I feel like I've already built up a pretty solid base for myself. But if you're still in that range of like 0 to 750, like that's a pretty good tactic for you to bring more people onto your page. Most of my engagement now comes from, I guess, keeping my current audience engaged, really, and answering their questions, and really just being supportive in what they do. I guess it's, to me, Twitter, like I have friends on Twitter, right? People who've stuck with me from the beginning, or new people who have been engaging a lot in my tweets, and I want to engage back with them because they're cool people. And I get kind of upset when accounts get really, really big and then just it's all about themselves, and they stop reaching out to other people. So like I'll keep following along with the releases or the questions that, you know, people have, and try to add value and comment and hype them up, you know, whenever I can. I think that's, I mean, it's just a really important part of this process. If you are looking to build a genuine, engaged audience and not just a large, uninterested following.
You are super good at that. And it's unique. It's pretty special. It's not like, not a lot of people do that. So thank you.
My last question is, I'm listening to the whole conversation, and building in public is about authenticity, sharing the building journey, ups and downs, struggles, weaknesses. But you, Aprilynne, you mentioned something about in the early days, you were basically creating content based on what people want to see. So it's not about your building journey. So I guess a lot of people would be wondering, like, how do you strike the balance when you talk about your building journey, when to just create content for people?
So I think in the beginning, keep in mind, at the beginning, no one cares about you because no one knows about you, and they don't know enough and they haven't seen enough from you in order to care about you. And so you can talk about what you're building if that helps you provide value. But, you know, the biggest thing when you're starting out is just like give, almost 100% give. And then once you've started to build out like a better reputation, or people know you for yourself a little bit better, that's when, at least personally, I think you can start delving into like what cool things you're doing. And always try to tie it back into, you know, how this can help someone else. But that's a cool thing about building in public, I think, is that you can talk about what you're doing yourself, but frame it in a way that it really helps other people. And so that's kind of like 2 birds in 1 stone. And you can do that as early as you want to, as long as, again, it's providing value to the people who follow you. So in terms of striking that balance, it's if it's just ask and give, again, like that 85 to 90% ask, 10 to 15% give, or build in public to try to do everything you can to give and to help your followers out.
All right. So to wrap this up, I just have one really quick question. I know you're working on a growing Twitter audience course. What else are you working on so that we can kind of follow your journey?
Yeah, of course. So obviously there's Tenderfoot as well, which is on the side. I just released my first Gumroad page yesterday. I designed personalized Twitter banners. So if that's up your alley, let me know or visit my Gumroad page. And then I also just started a podcast with my friend Josh Fonseca, the founder of We Watch. He had an amazing weekend, if anyone's been following along that journey. Like over 22,000 new users and 1 million interactions in one weekend. It was insane. And we've released 2 episodes of our podcast. It's called Hacker Pod. It's on Spotify if anyone wants to check that out.
Wow. All of that on top of your full-time job. So thank you so much for being with us today, Aprilynne. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Really, thanks so much.
And thank you to everyone who attended. You guys are amazing, asking good questions, very engaging. So have a great day, great afternoon, evening. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.